Welcome to Long Story Short, a podcast where two financial advisors, one rooted in financial planning, the other in investment strategy, break down the questions we're actually hearing from our clients. Each episode, we tackle one or two real-world issues that matter to high-net-worth individuals, from market-moving news to personal finance decisions with lasting impact. No jargon, no fluff, just clear, thoughtful insights from the front lines of wealth management. We keep it short, but we don't cut corners. This is Long Story Short.
Andy, here we are, episode 19 of Long Story Short. Can you believe it's almost been 20 episodes? Does it feel like 20? Does it feel like 5? Does it feel like 100?
I mean, I feel like it's like 5. I feel like we just started doing this thing.
Yeah, I think the hardest part of keeping track of what we've talked about and what's still on the list. But luckily, we're getting a lot of great questions. I think this week we got a really good mix of topics ranging from, we're going to hit on the ABCs of Medicare. We got a great question about paying off your mortgage before retirement. And what was the third one?
And then the third one is, how can I reduce my RMDs? Why are my RMDs
Everyone
so high?
hates their required minimum distributions, but even if you're not taking RMDs, it still is important to listen to the end because there's some useful forward-looking planning that can come out of this. So let's start with the ABCs of Medicare. And I feel like we keep going to these topics where my initial thought is this could be a 10-hour podcast or a 3-day seminar. And we're going to talk about this in a few minutes. So
Say it all in 10 minutes. Be short, be precise.
Yes, in the spirit of open enrollment season, we're going to talk about the highest level, the 100,000 foot overview of Medicare, the various parts, and just call it some practical tips for navigating open enrollment season. So as we all know, and especially for those on Medicare currently, the last few months of the calendar year is open enrollment season. When you pick your plans for the upcoming calendar year, it's when all the Joe Namath commercials are on. All the old sports and sports icons and celebrities pumping their own Medicare Advantage plans. The billboards are up, and
I've always wondered about those.
Yeah, well, we'll talk about those and what they are and how they're different than original Medicare, which I think it can stump people sometimes unless they really enjoy spending their weekends reading about this. But this time of year, it's very easy. I'm going to start with like a practical thing that I run into and advise clients on. It's really easy to say, I've got my plan choice. I'm comfortable with what I'm doing. I'm going to keep the status quo. And I think even if it makes sense to continue doing what you've been doing, every year revisit your plan during open enrollment. Like open up the hood, see what's different.
This reminds me of our behavioral finance episode, right? The status quo bias.
Yeah,
that's a real thing.
This is the status quo bias. Look at your Part D, which prescription drug plan you're on, review your Medicare Advantage plan, revisit, whether original Medicare or Medicare Advantage makes sense, which we'll talk about, but just call time out and do a review and see where you are and have your circumstances change. Had the plan you're on change? Is there a new drug you're on that's covered on one plan but not another? All really important things to consider. We partner with Move Health as a great resource for our clients to help review these plans. They're an independent, essentially a third-party consulting firm that is going through some really great educational conversations with our clients. But whatever method you take, don't just sit on it. Just kind of start from ground zero and revisit your plan. So on that note, let's do a quick rundown of the ABCs of Medicare. I'm going to start by saying there's really the first big decision you need to make as a Medicare enrollee is, do I want to go down the path of original Medicare, or do I want to just enroll in a Medicare Advantage plan? And I'll talk about the differences, pros and cons, when one might make sense versus another. Original Medicare is the same old boring Part A, B, B, and a Medigap plan that most of us are familiar with. Part A is your hospital insurance. So this is like your catastrophic insurance through Medicare. It covers mostly, hospital visits, some skilled nursing care, and other things related to like hospital level needs. Part B of Medicare is what we would think of as our just typical old going to the doctors, going to your primary care physician insurance. It mostly covers doctor's visits and what you would consider to be just like a routine health care. Part D is your prescription drug coverage. So it covers, any kind of medications you need to take. And then a Medigap plan covers anything typically that parts A, B, and D do not cover. So Part A and B are pretty standardized through Medicare. Part A, there's no insurance, there's no premium. It's free. As long as you have a certain number of um, they call them quarters that you've paid in, which most people do by the time they hit 65. So no charge for Part A. Part B, the premium changes slightly every year. 2025, it's $185 a month. And Part D, depending on the drug plan you choose, that cost will vary, but it typically averages around 30 to 40 bucks a month, depending on which of the drug plans aligns with your needs. So the monthly premiums under original Medicare are not wildly expensive, right? Especially when people are used to spending thousands of dollars a month on health insurance when they're not on Medicare and not covered with an employer. The Medigap plans are really dependent upon which of the plans you choose. There's a whole alphabet of them, and they do a great job of filling the gap. That's why they're called Medigap, and what A, B, and D are not able and willing to cover. So when you
Did they
add up,
just skip the letter C?
uh, yeah, well, Medigap is typically seen as Part C. Uh,
Yeah,
but the technical term just being Medigap because it fills the gap.
it fills that gap
But
there. Yeah,
yeah, anything the government does has to be a little bit confusing. Going from A
of
to B
course.
to C would have just been too easy. Um, so those all wrapped up, you're looking at if you look at your typical A, B, D, and Medigap plan, you're looking at a few $100s a month typically in premiums. Um, and the good thing about Medicare, going through original Medicare, is if you're a snowbird or if you travel or if you want a lot of flexibility in where you get care, original Medicare is great because as long as that health network accepts Medicare, you essentially can go there, right? So if you have a specialist out in California and you live in Texas, as long as wherever you're going accepts Medicare, you've got, some options on the table. Medicare Advantage is a lot cheaper in terms of monthly premiums. Essentially, you can get Medicare Advantage plans for almost no cost. Like literally, some of these insurers subsidize it fully, so it's almost zero
Hmm.
premium. Most of them are at least around the Part B premium amount, so 185, 200 bucks a month. They usually come with more perks, like they'll include some things that Medicare doesn't cover, like vision, dental, some like lifestyle things, like some have like gym membership credits. So they have more perks. Everything is wrapped into a single insurance card. So it's cheaper. It's it simplifies things, but you're in a network. So if you're a snowbird or you travel or you want a ton of flexibility, um, of where you get care, these Medicare Advantage plans essentially operate like a gated network. So you have to stay within that network or you have to get special approval to go outside of it, which can be very difficult. Um, and so there's definitely, as you can see, some pros and cons to be considered. I would say, quite frankly, for someone to consider a Medicare Advantage plan, they should be on the, you should have like no known major health issues. Like being generally young, active, and healthy is usually a bare bones requirement for that. You don't spend half your year one place or half your year another place. You're pretty immobile in terms of like where you're living most of the year, and you love your network of doctors. So before you enroll in a Medicare Advantage plan, if you love, like I said, you're like in a health network and you love your doctor, you love your specialist, you want to find out and ask those doctors, hey, which Medicare Advantage plan do you guys accept, if any? Um, and so if you can stay in your network and you're happy with it, then that might be a big plus. But the second you need some flexibility in terms of veering outside of those walls, then you might run into some challenges. Also, people think low premium, they think cheaper. Everything has a cost. Medicare Advantage plans typically have higher out-of-pocket expenses. So if you do end up, that's why I say like it should lean towards naturally just like generally healthy people. Because once your tab starts to run up, you could see higher out-of-pocket costs. So original Medicare, boring, a little more expensive month to month, more predictable though, because less out-of-pocket costs, more flexible. Medicare Advantage, cheaper, has some extra perks with it. Um, okay if you're healthy and not really bouncing around that much. So that is, to the best of my ability, a 5 or 6 minute rundown on all things Medicare. But I say revisit it every year. I would say I don't like generalized advice. But I would say in most cases, just like through experience, in many cases, a lot of people like the predictability and flexibility of original Medicare. They enroll in it, they stick with it, and they just kind of keep that certainty in their pocket through retirement. But again, like all things personal finance, there's a personal element to it, so you need to consider all factors and kind of go from there. There's a lot of studies that are done by Fidelity, other big institutions, both at the public and private level, that talk about costs of healthcare and retirement, and out-of-pocket costs of things not covered by Medicare or Medicare Advantage can be a big piece of that, but also the monthly premiums. So you see these studies showing that the average person retiring at age 65 is spending a couple $100,000 roughly over their retirement horizon on healthcare. These types of decisions and revisiting them every year are crucial. So that's
Yeah.
it. Did I miss anything? Or you're still awake, which is a huge plus for me.
It sounds,
I'm
yeah.
getting energized by your facial expressions, just telling me, tell me more
I'm
about
just letting you
Medicare.
go. I am just
Yeah,
letting you go,
tell me
right?
more about Medicare.
Let him cook. Let him cook. Yeah. So, so basically, what you're saying is, this is something to evaluate to make sure you're getting the coverage that you likely need in a given year, so you're not spending too much out of pocket, or at the very least, that you're not overspending on premiums. Which is why this is something that you need to revisit. You recommend people revisit this on an annual basis?
Yeah, I think it makes a ton of sense, especially if they're on any sort of prescription drugs. With these Part D plans, you're really like, if you're on a Medicare Advantage plan, you definitely, want to revisit every year. But especially with the prescription drug plan, if you're on any kind of medication, there is high turnover in these plans and what's covered, what not. So they want you to go generic. All of that is something that annually you want to keep an eye on.
All right. We'll just add it to the list of things to do here as we approach end of year. It's open enrollment season now, as you mentioned. So this is like a fourth quarter homework assignment, maybe before you start taking RMDs.
Yeah, it's the dreaded RMDs, and this is around the time of year we're always advocates, Andy, right? Of unless if you don't need your required minimum distribution to live off of during the year, to defer it to year end to take it, right? Is that with the general? I mean, obviously, we're not making a guarantee or any sort of like market timing recommendation, but in general, people like to
It's
keep
just a
their money
winning bet.
invested.
Keep it invested, keep it tax deferred as long as possible. So yeah, absolutely, it makes sense. I mean, it's not going to work every year, right? Because there's going to be some good years, some bad years. But essentially, the way that RMDs. So I had someone ask me today, what does that stand for? It stands for required minimum distribution. And it's basically the point at which the government says, I want my money, right? 'Cause, they want their tax revenues. And so eventually once you get to a certain age, and it used to be a nice, easy, age 70, age 70 and a half, what have you. Now it's like, if you're born in 1960, it's this. If you're born in 1961, it's that, right? They've kind of complicated it a little bit here on us. But essentially, you're going to have to take required minimum distributions from those IRAs. And yeah, when it comes to RMDs, it can really, they can start to add up.
They certainly can. It's amazing when you model out for certain retirees with, several $1 million in pre-tax IRA and 401k accounts showing several $100,000 RMDs in their 70s and 80s. And that's when their heads
Yeah.
start to spin. Wait a minute, I'm reporting more income in my 80s than I did in my peak earning years.
Right.
Uh,
Those are supposed to be your low tax years.
Yeah, that's why I said, like generally retirement, there's a lot of exciting things to do from a tax planning standpoint. But if you go on autopilot and you don't get ahead of some of this stuff, you certainly can run into a big tax bill at the wrong time. And let's talk through ways to navigate this, right? And we'll kind of break it into two camps. There's, for those with a longer term time horizon, how do I get in front of not having to worry about these large minimum distribution? And for those that are currently retired, how do I get around making
Those
these
are kind of like
large?
two separate problems, right? Either I'm in it
Two,
now and it's a problem, or I'm planning for it in the future.
yeah, exactly. So for those that are still working towards retirement, the easiest thing you can do is focus on tax diversification. We talk a lot about asset allocation, and you want to have some equities, you want to have some other assets depending on your goals, but a lot of focus is put on investment diversification, what you're holding in your portfolio and why. But asset diversification is a real thing by tax type. And what that really means is if you only save into a 401k pre-tax and you do nothing else, you're going to hit retirement with a large pre-tax bucket of money and little flexibility. But if
Well,
you
and keep in mind, yeah, and that's what I just want to cut in there and make a point here. When you take money out of a traditional IRA or a 401k, that's taxed as ordinary income,
like a paycheck.
right? Yeah, just like your paycheck, right? So I think that's the thing a lot of people don't realize is that money that you pull out of that IRA, you may see a balance that says $1 million, but you have to factor in the taxes that come out of that, and it's ordinary income, not something that's more preferential like long-term capital gains.
Exactly. And on that note, so what you can do is instead of just saying all my money is going into my pre-tax retirement account, which feels really good when you're doing it because you get this tax write-off, it's isolated, it's this growing investment bucket, your employer might match into it, all really great things. But you
It's a
should
good
think
habit
about,
to be in,
yeah, it's a great
for
habit.
sure.
Yeah, I don't want to
Yeah.
discourage that at all, but you also should think about tweaking those contributions or with outside other savings, start to invest in a taxable investment account or a Roth investment account or an HSA, like other, you want to build up to boil this all down into a really simple form. It's you want to build as much flexibility into your plan as you can. So only investing into one asset. Like I wouldn't tell you to just put all your money in one stock or one sector of the economy, right? Like we know the
It's fair.
benefits of diversification. We should apply that same thing to our tax diversification. So Andy, you love taxable investment accounts more than anybody because you're the capital gain. Yeah, you're all about like capital gains are better than everything, even dividend income, right? Like,
Oh
uh,
man,
but yeah,
I've
that's
got solutions for you. You got a big capital gains problem. Let me tell you
yes,
that.
yes, yeah, exactly. So if you've got a horizon, build in flexibility, right? Like just
hmm
don't just save into one bucket, and then if you do that, then that's going to really be your best friend.
So it's interesting. I feel like I have this conversation with young people when they're trying to navigate, how do I set up my saving strategy, right? So it's maybe their first job out of school, and we're talking about how much do you put into a 401k? Do you take advantage of the match? Why would you invest in an individual brokerage account that's taxable, right? And, for young people, the goal oftentimes is, saving for a down payment on a house or something along those lines, right? Where it pays to have that flexibility. But in the context of RMDs, why do you think it's so important to have this level of flexibility later in life?
Well, number one, the less dollars you have in pre-tax retirement accounts, the smaller your RMDs are going to be. So that's number one. If you, all else, being equal, if you have less money in pre-tax retirement accounts, your first RMD or your early year RMD bites are going to be much smaller. So that's a positive. The other thing is, and this kind of ties into the second phase of planning, even those that are, this might even cover a lot of people that already are retired, is if you have different buckets of money by tax type and you retire before RMD age, so let's say you retire at 67, okay, instead
Hmm.
of 73 or 75, you have more places to pull money from that are not just taxed as ordinary income. It keeps your overall income lower for those years. So now you can consider doing things like Roth conversions to move money from the pre-tax bucket to a Roth bucket. You're not working anymore, but your income is very low. So that helps you start to shift some money out of pre-tax to Roth prior to RMD age. So that's a way to create tax diversification while you're not saving. And Roth accounts do not have minimum distributions, which is what makes
Right.
this
The
extra
government already
enticing.
got their money, right? That's why.
Yes,
That's why.
exactly. So that can be incredibly efficient. Like say you're 65, your RMDs start at 75, and you've got this really nice spread of money in different buckets. You could pull from a taxable investment account, um, realize some nominal capital gains to fund your lifestyle for early retirement. And that, while you're doing that, keep your income relatively low. And then that might buy you some room to do some meaningful Roth conversions for 10 years so that by the time minimum distribution age comes, you've got less that you're being forced to pull.
So the game, I always like thinking of it this way. You've got like buckets that make up your tax brackets. And
Yes,
essentially you're just trying to fill up those lower tax brackets, right? In the
that
case
can
that
be.
you mentioned earlier where you've got someone who's got like a couple of $100,000 in RMDs, you don't have a lot of flexibility there, right? You're going to be paying quite a bit in taxes. But if you're age 67 and you're not taking RMDs till age 75, then you can take advantage of some like really low tax rates and ultimately pay less in taxes and then take advantage of the tax-free growth that a Roth provides.
Yeah. And this is what's amazing is going through this exercise as many times as, like I have. I mean, it's just the ratios are always different. People's tax situations are different. So it's really one of those unique conversations. But I think the name of the game is before you retire and while you're saving, and an early retirement, if you retire before minimum distribution age, focus on saving into various different types of investment buckets, and then take advantage of Roth conversions early on when and how you can. And there's one other way. People always get disappointed when I tell them there's limited options to navigate this other than to just uh, bite the bullet and take the minimum distribution. But there's one other way to, reduce, not even necessarily reduce your minimum distribution amount, but to change the tax treatment completely. And that is a qualified charitable distribution, a QCD, um, which is essentially a charitable withdrawal out of your IRA account that happens tax
Directly
free.
out of your IRA account, though, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so some interesting rules with QCDs that are going to make, there's a piece of this that still blows my mind. So the QCD age, the age at which you can begin making charitable distributions from your IRA, used to line up beautifully with the minimum distribution age. They were both 70 and a half. So you could make up to $100,000 per individual, QCDs, charitable distributions directly out of your IRA to a charitable 501c3 organization every year. And it lined up exactly at the time when RMDs were supposed to begin. When all of these Secure Act changes went into place, the QCD age stayed the same, so it's still 70 and a half, but the RMD age got pushed out further. So you can make up to the $100,000 amount, you can make charitable distributions from your IRA before RMD age even begins, up to that $100,000 figure. And what that does is that reduces the pre-tax dollar amount that you have to take RMDs out of once you turn minimum distribution age. But let's say to give you a practical example, let's say you want to wait until your minimum distributions begin. Your RMD is $40,000 a year. You can just give $40,000 directly out of your IRA to a 501c3 that year, and then now you're reporting zero in income off that RMD. So up to 100 grand, if you've got several hundred thousand in RMDs, it solves only a portion of your problem, but you can gift up to $100,000 out of your IRA to a charity as long as you're 70 and a half.
So if you don't need the distribution to live off of, and you happen to be charitably inclined, this is a way to make that charitable contribution in a way that's really tax efficient.
Incredibly tax efficient, arguably, and because most people that are retired and are minimum distribution age don't itemize on their tax return because now the standard deduction is so high. Like most of them, if they do make gifts, don't really reap any sort of a tax benefit from it anyway. So this is a way to get a tax benefit, no matter how small it is, even if it's $5,000 or a couple, whatever the dollar amount is, you're going to get a direct tax benefit from it doing it as a QCD.
This is income that you're required to take,
right?
Unless you punt it to a charitable organization, and now
Correct.
It's not income that you actually received.
Correct. Yeah. So those are things to consider. I think it's building flexibility while you can, whether that's working years or early retirement, and then thinking of charitable strategies, once you turn 70 and a half and really thinking about your tolerance for making gifts out of the IRA. Otherwise, you get to a point where your options are limited. Outside of that, I get asked all the time, can I gift my IRA to my kids? No. Can I write a letter to the IRS saying, please, I don't want to take my RMDs? No.
Has that ever worked?
Can I just not take it and wait to get audited? No. So, it's like
that's a good way to get audited, huh?
They've given you 70 some years to plan for this, like you can do it.
You can do it. All right. Well, those are all good tips. We're kind of like on the topic of things that are directly relevant to people in retirement. So we can stay on that theme today. So Adam, let me ask you this question. When I say the word debt, what is that a good thing or a bad thing in your mind?
I just think of Dave Ramsey.
I mean, I think a lot of people think that way, right?
Well, when I think of debt, I think of divisive, right? I think of people like there's, people like Dave Ramsey who actually, we're joking about this now, but like to help people pay off debt, like credit card debt, he has a good program that's easy to follow. That is
credit card debt, I would say, is bad debt. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like I think of like people that hate debt, like advocates of no debt, even a mortgage. It's like pay it off as fast as you can. And then on the other extreme now, you see people like what's the guy, Robert Kiyosaki? It's probably butchering his name. That's like take out as much debt as you can and buy income producing assets. Debt is good. And you've got everything in between. So debt to me is like super divisive, and it's an emotional thing. There's people that their stomachs turn when they think of debt.
Right. It's just this concept of owing someone, right? Like that can really weigh over people.
Yeah, which I get.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Yeah, I oftentimes, I feel like it's probably most common, just kind of out there, not inside the finance sphere, just kind of like talking to everyday people that they view debt as like a bad thing, something that they want to get out from under. And, so I think it's really interesting. We just went through this phase now where, mortgage rates are kind of closer to what they historically might average, but we went through a phase where people could borrow money for a mortgage and it was next to free, right?
Yeah.
like, interest rates in the twos, right? Super, super cheap. And so it's interesting that this question comes up sometimes where people say, hey, you know what? I'm retiring. I want to pay off my mortgage. Should I do that? What do you think, Adam?
We get this question all the time. And I think there's a math answer and then there's like a psychological answer. And it's not black and white. It's it's like a peace of mind, a battle of peace of mind over, what the numbers tell you, even with conservative assumptions. And I'll break this into two camps. I'll break this into the camp of people with a sub 4% mortgage rate, and then into the camp of people with like a 2022 to 2025, 6-7% mortgage rate. People with, I've had this, conversation with clients that have 2.5% mortgage rates and they really want to pay it off completely. And I tell them what you would imagine anyone would tell them that's looking at things from a numbers perspective. Clearly, the hurdle rate, take the same several $100,000 you'd use to pay off your mortgage. You're reducing a 2.5% rate, future liability that's costing you 2.5%. It's safe to assume that over the, any reasonable period, that 2.5% is a hurdle rate that you can beat with that money staying invested in the market over time. Most people would say, yeah.
Yeah. That's essentially
right.
like, can I beat
Yeah.
inflation, right?
T-bills.
Like,
Like T-bills. You
Sure.
can, for a lot of those people, you can invest in T-bills right now and beat that very comfortably with some spread on top of it. So you have to be realistic of the fact that if your rate's that low, you can buy ultra safe assets now like treasuries and still get over the hurdle. And they get
Yeah.
it. And still then I can say that till someone's blue in the face, but if they're going to feel 20% better or like significantly, very like if their peace of mind is going to go up that significantly by just getting rid of this debt off their balance sheet and they have plenty of other resources to live off of, then they can afford to do that. And if it makes them feel good, then that's completely fine. I'm not big into like over optimization. Clearly, if you don't have the resources to live off of after you pay off your mortgage, if you were to do that, then that's not a smart move. But if you're going to be okay and you can pay off your mortgage and it's going to make you feel good, even if the numbers tell you otherwise, then I think that that's a fine decision that doesn't need to be over litigated. If you have a 6-7% mortgage, then the case looks different, right?
The math changes. Yeah.
Yeah, the math changes. Your hurdle rate is higher in terms of what that money needs to earn. If you don't pay down the mortgage, the interest is, depending on the size of your loan, the interest could be substantial. So I think that just goes more into like a coin flip kind of scenario with a lot of the tiebreaker being flexibility. Uh, the mortgage is costing you something, but that cash on hand is giving you a tool in your tool belt to have some flexible options in the future. What
Yeah.
would you say on that with like the 6-7%?
Yeah, 6-7%, obviously, now it's more of a risk, right? Are you going to be able to beat that hurdle rate? It's certainly not a guarantee. So at that point, if you have the means and you're going to feel better about paying it off, to me that's much more of a coin flip. It's an interesting thing. I like your answer where like it's fine. You don't need to over optimize this because I think reasonable people can make different decisions on this. And honestly, I think that's probably the case for a lot of things in investing in finance, right? Like the goal should not be perfection. None of us are economic man. We did that whole biases episode, not to yell at people for having biases, but just to hopefully make people understand better kind of how they're naturally going to react to things, right?
Right.
So yourself, and there's the personal angle to this where
Yeah.
some people are like, load my account up with margin. Let's go. I just want to maximize returns. I don't care about the roller coaster ride. And, if you think about it, like a mortgage is kind of like margin, right? Like you're using that money, you're borrowing it to buy a house. And if you want to pay it off, I think the thing to think about is there's an opportunity cost to it, right?
Yeah,
So,
certainly.
if you, let's say you've got a $500,000 mortgage and you've got $500,000 and you're deciding, okay, do I pay off the mortgage? Right. That I'm basically guaranteeing a return because I'm not going to have to pay that interest rate, right, into the future for the next 10, 20 years, whatever it may be. Maybe that's the choice you make. Or if you think, hey, you know what, maybe I can take this money and I can beat that, and I'm not going to think twice about the fact that this is debt and I owe it one way or another. Like, some people just have a higher risk tolerance, right? And I think
Yeah.
it probably falls more neatly along those lines. Really about like a risk tolerance conversation than anything.
I think you're totally right. The risk tolerance angle of it, and, just the personal wiring. Some people are like, yeah, whatever, mortgage. Okay, you think my 3% mortgage doesn't make sense to pay it off. I'll keep it. No worries. Let's move on. Other people have got it in their minds that going into retirement debt free is the biggest accomplishment they can, they've
Yeah.
just like, they've had their mindset on it, and that's great.
I
Then
think there's
do it.
a generational thing there too, right? Because like think about where rates were in like the 70s and 80s
Yeah.
even, right? Like it was so high. When you've got mortgages that are in the teens, like everyone's always like, oh well, you know, people in the 70s and 80s bought homes for $100,000 that are now worth over $1 million, and it was
Yeah.
like, it was so cheap back then. But also the mortgage rates were really, really high back then, right? And I think a lot of people still remember that time frame. And again, we'll come back to biases, right? Anchoring bias, right? If that's where you started your life, and this idea that debt is this like really big number that can really balloon, and you're paying off a ton in interest, right, and not even making back much principal. Sometimes we can be slow to adapt that you're paying a lot less in interest these days
Yeah.
in 2025 than you were maybe in 1975. And whether that is like so-called rational or not, that's people's lived experiences, right? And that's going to color the way that you react even decades later.
I think that's really true. And also, just on the mortgage, for those that do elect to pay off their mortgage, whether, because it's not always an all or none proposition. Maybe it's just that you aggressively make larger payments towards it and you don't just pay it off all in a one shot. It's not an all in or all out kind of thing. But what I say to people that do elect to pay it off more of on a lump sum format, make sure you still have a cushion for potential larger health expenses, right? Like we keep saying flexibility. Don't just say, oh, I've got enough expenses. I have enough on the side to live on my budget, keep enough on top of that, and keep enough of a cushion to get you through any kind of unforeseen changes.
Maybe that's the theme of this episode: flexibility in retirement.
That's the key. That is the key. But on the over optimization note, I saw something really funny on LinkedIn over the weekend. I don't normally see something on LinkedIn that's funny or exciting, but I saw it was like a fake. Someone used like AI to make like a mock obituary for someone, and it was like here, so and so name, and it's like the headline of the obituary was like, John he optimized his 401k withdrawals in retirement and saved X amount in taxes and beat the market by X% over this time horizon. It sits at the bottom and like,
All that's
uh,
so impressive, right?
it's like, the things that you don't see or the things that don't, ultimately don't really, well, you don't want them driving your overall decisions. These things are supposed to complement your lifestyle and and kind of what you want to, what type of life you want to live. It's not, going down to the minutia here to get everything right.
Yeah. It's rarely that there's like a right and a wrong answer, right? There's
Hmm.
the right answer for you, and that might be very different from, the right answer for me, right? And I think just having that understanding, there certainly are things where like, yeah, you don't want to be up to your eyeballs in credit card debt, right? That's just bad. But for something like this, you're probably fine either way you go.
Yeah, I agree. Well, great questions this week, and we will keep them coming. It is long story short at Bernie, BURNEY.com with any questions. And I'm glad Andy's already agreed to join next week in his Halloween costume.
Oh my gosh. Is that yeah, because you're right. It will be Halloween when we're published next
Yeah,
time. So
we'll
I've got a
cover some
few I've got a
spooky
few
market facts.
I've got a few options. So my daughter's gonna be a ghost. My son's gonna be a ghost. My daughter's gonna be a vampire. I've got a. Did you ever watch the TV show The League about
Yes.
fantasy football bros? I've got a Mr. McGiblets costume from that.
Okay.
I've got the Pop Tart from the Pop Tart Bowl costume. Uh, so I've got a bluey. I got so many different angles I can go here. I'll have to get creative.
Okay. Okay. Well, we'll see which one you choose next week.
All right. See you then.
This podcast featured Adam Newman and Amy Pratt of Bernie Wealth Management, which is a division of the Bernie Company, an investment advisory firm. Adam is managing partner and is chartered financial analyst, certified financial planner, master of taxation, and retirement income certified professional. And Andy is senior partner and director of investment strategy and is a chartered financial analyst and chartered alternative investment analyst. Long story short involves general discussions of a broad range of current financial topics related to financial planning, taxes, investment, and retirement. This content is for informational, educational purposes only and is not intended as personalized investment advice or recommendation. It does not take into account your financial situation. You'll need to consult with a qualified financial advisor or professional who is familiar with your specific circumstances. Investing involves risks, and past performance is not indicative of future results. The Bernie Company is an SEC-registered investment advisor. Registration with the SEC or any state securities authority does not apply to the Bernie Company or any of its principals or employees, possesses a particular level of skill or training in the investment advisory business or any other business. Bernie Company does not provide legal, tax, or accounting advice, but offers it through third parties. Before making any financial decisions, clients should consult their legal and/or tax advisors.